Hey, I'm Rick Salmon. I'm here with my good friend Hal Bullschmidt. Behind the camera is Juan. We're here for PhotoFest Japan. It's going to start in 2 days. It's going to happen again next year. We came early because we want to photograph some of the incredible sights in Japan that you can experience if you come next year. Right now, we're shooting HDR photography, high dynamic range photography, because the contrast range in this scene is too great for a single image to record. So again, HDR photography. And Hal, talk a little bit about exactly what is HDR photography.
Sure. HDR, or high dynamic range, is photography designed to take multiple shots so that we can capture the entire range of a scene. That is, from the darkest shadows to the brightest highlights, and have detail everywhere if we want it. Now typically we're going to do that using our camera's auto exposure bracketing functionality. And we can get, in most cases, up to 9 or 13 stops of dynamic range, allowing us to come out here and shoot this temple on a day like today. Rick, what other tips do you have besides using that AEB?
Well, when it comes to HDR photography, you really want to have your camera on a tripod. You can hand hold if you have a high-speed camera and using a wide lens. But you want to put your camera on a tripod. The aperture has to stay the same. You don't want to touch the camera. Now, if the bracketing range is beyond the automatic exposure bracketing range, then you have to switch to manual. Now, what about processing, Hal?
Well, for processing, after I have all of my images, and I know that I have good highlight and good shadow detail, I typically use Photomatix Pro. And in Photomatix Pro, I'm going to take all those images, merge them together into a radiance file, and then start my workflow. And that's going to be setting my white and black point basically down to 0, making sure I don't clip or lose any of my highlights or shadows. And then I'll start up with the strength slider, work my way down. How about you?
Well, I do the same thing, but then I find out, by compressing this brightness range, you lose contrast. And contrast really makes the pictures come alive. So I go into Photoshop, I boost the contrast using an S-curve. It's really the best way I feel to increase the contrast. Don't use the contrast slider, although it has been improved. And I find that you really have to sharpen the pictures too.
Absolutely, I do the same thing. I take that result coming out of Photomatix Pro, treat it just like it was a raw file, and go through my basic workflow, adding that white and black point, good contrast in there, and a little bit of input sharpening. And it turns out pretty spectacular.
It does. And getting back to Photomatix, you have to press that default button, unless you have like 1,000 pictures of a temple, right?
Exactly.
You have to press that default button because the last setting is applied. Well, listen, there are so many incredible picture opportunities around here. Let's go. I just want to give you one more tip. When you're carrying your tripod and you have a strap, put your thumb through the strap, because if the camera falls off, you'll be in big trouble if your thumb isn't through the strap. Come on, Hal, let's go.
Let's do it.